Good morning. It is Friday, December the 21st, and this is The Drill. Okay, thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So, let's look at this. I'm the Glenn Beck, and I'm going to play a little something from his podcast. Let's see what we got here.
All right. Let me tell you about Abby Johnson. Abby Johnson, another great person whose life just totally changed. She was working for Planned Parenthood for years. She was a supporter of abortion. She had abortions. She rose through the ranks of Planned Parenthood, started running the place, and then she had to actually go into a room with an abortion, and her whole world changed.
She'd be a great conversation on a podcast as well, actually, at some point. They're putting together a film called UnplannedFilm.com. UnplannedFilm.com. You can read the story. You can check out the videos. You can lend your support, which would be really important. When we want to get these messages out, we need to support them when they come up. UnplannedFilm.com. UnplannedFilm.com is the place to go.
The fusion of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
This has not been a good couple of weeks for Donald Trump, and well-timed if you're a fan of the president, because nobody's really paying attention to the news right now. But if you are, just look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks alone. Kavanaugh has gone to the side of the Democrats in the Supreme Court when it comes to abortion. The Russian agreement that everybody was in denial of for so long, and the president said never existed, that came out yesterday. He folded on the border, and not only are they not going to pay for the wall in Mexico, there is no wall, and we gave them $5 billion. Okay, then North Korea came out yesterday. North Korea said that we're not going to denuclearize at all unless you remove your troops. Syria, we're abandoning the Kurds again. Yesterday, the president just announced on Twitter, no one at the Pentagon even knew. We're going to pull our troops out of Syria. It's time for them to come home. Wait, what? The poor Kurds? The Christians? ISIS is not dead. They've just been pinned back. What does that mean? It's not been a good week. We'll give you some of the details and what it all means in 1 minute.
Okay, so good old Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is the fool, the idiot, that actually went ahead and went on a hunger strike because Donald Trump was nominated by the Republican Party to lead the party and become the next president of the United States. That's what kind of fool he was. He ends up having to eat his words, and I mean, he hates Donald Trump. But he did, I'll give him credit for coming back and admitting that he was wrong. But he still hates Donald Trump. And everything that he talks about in this little clip demonstrates it. First of all, he says it's a bad week for a couple of weeks for Donald Trump, and but well-timed if you're a fan of the president. A fan, not a supporter, not a voter, but a fan, trivializing people. And then if. What do you mean if? Haven't you been paying attention, Mr. Beck, to the tens of thousands of people that come to his rallies? Don't you forget that he won the presidential election? So what do you mean if? Then he goes in and basically he names all of the things that went wrong, allegedly. We'll deal with that in a second. But he doesn't deal with any of the things that have been going right during this past 2 weeks. First of all, China. We have a situation where we were scheduled on January 1st to put in some more not sanctions, but tariffs on Chinese goods. And the consensus seemed to be that if that happened, then it would be a full-out trade war with China. And instead, the United States and China agreed to a truce, a 90-day truce, and they're going to look at things again in March. Okay, so he doesn't name that. He doesn't say, realize the economy is still going along at over 3% GDP. He doesn't mention that the unemployment rate is still the lowest it's been in decades, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't mention any of the good things. He just seizes on all the things that he thinks are bad. And in some cases, he's premature. Let's take the border. He goes on and on about how, there's $5 billion wasted and nobody in Mexico is supposed to pay and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But Glenn Beck doesn't understand Donald Trump, like most people don't. Because there's been a lot of people this week that have been gnashing their teeth over Donald Trump, and Donald Trump looking like he's going to cave in, give in to the Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. And what nobody seems to pick up on is Donald Trump's style. Okay, Donald Trump's style is to invite you in. What he does, his tactics is, you come to him and you say, I want XYZ. And he always says, yes, sure, sounds good, love to. And we can remember the times when he sat down with the Democrats and they say, well, we want this, that, or the other thing. And he says, sure, I can do that. I'll sign that. Send that bill to me. And you think, oh my God, he's caving in. But he knows something that the average person doesn't, that the devil's in the details. That when they send the bill to him, he can very easily say, wait a minute. Yes, I said I'd sign the bill, but this isn't what I agreed to. I'm not going to go for this or that or the other thing, but I'll tell you what I will go for. And that's when the negotiation starts. What he does is he gets you salivating. He gets you hyped up. He gets you thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get rich here. And then he takes it away from you. He says, oh, no, I'm not agreeing to this. And you're starting to lose what you assumed you were going to get. Now you're psychologically behind the 8 ball. Now he starts running the show. He starts with the negotiations, which you weren't expecting because you think that he's just going to go ahead and give you whatever he wants. He does this over and over and over again. And he did it this time as well. Where he told the Democrats, sure, I'll go ahead and sign a bill for a temporary stopgap. But did he sign it? No, not yet. There's something that's supposed to be going on the way to his desk from the House. The House is going to go back to the Senate and whatnot. But basically, he said no. He's not going to. He's going to veto it and leave it up to the Senate to try to override the veto. So that's his technique, and we all have to remember that. That's the way he does things. You go to him and you want something, he'll always tell you yes up front because he knows that the devil's in the details. So then as far as Korea is concerned, Korea says that Glenn Beck makes it out as though Korea is thumbing their nose at the United States. Let him do it because the sanctions are still on. Okay, so if Kim Jong-un wants to thumb his nose, let him do it until he starves to death. Who cares? All the better as far as I'm concerned. So, again, Glenn Beck hates Donald Trump, and he should be opening every show with that little tag. He should be saying, hi, this is Glenn Beck from The Glenn Beck Show, and I hate Donald Trump. Now, on with the news or on with my program. Because, I mean, everything that he does... he tries to pretend that he's neutral or that he's come around on Donald Trump, but in reality, he hasn't. He hates him as much now as he did 2 years ago. So, when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Ayn Rand's, the Ayn Rand Lexicon. All right, thank you very much. Welcome back. And the Ayn Rand Lexicon, which deals with important concepts and abstractions, and the concept of the day is determinism. One of my favorites because it's one of the left's favorite techniques. Any big government interference in our lives is validated or justified with the theory, the political theory of determinism. And determinism isn't really even a valid theory because it's wrong, it's contradictory, it's wrong axiomatically. We know it's wrong by the evidence of our senses. So, determinism, the concept of the day. Determinism is a theory that everything that happens in the universe, including every thought, feeling, and action of man, is necessitated by previous factors, so that nothing could ever have happened differently from the way it did, and everything in the future is already preset and inevitable. Every aspect of man's life and character on this view is merely a product of factors that are ultimately outside of his control. Objectivism rejects this theory. Dictatorship and determinism are reciprocally reinforcing corollaries. If one seeks to enslave men, one has to destroy their reliance on the validity of their own judgments and choices. If one believes that reason and volition are impotent, one has to accept the rule of force. So she says objectivism rejects this theory. What she should have said was reality rejects this theory. That in reality, we know we have free will, and we know that by the evidence of our senses, and that it's axiomatic. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from first The Death of Right and Wrong by Tammy Bruce, and then The Black Book of the American Left by David Horowitz. Thank you very much, and welcome back. So, the Death of Right and Wrong by Tammy Bruce. Tammy Bruce is an excellent person to listen to or read because she's been there. She's been on the left and became a conservative, and this is a book that in part explains how she became a lefty and how she became a conservative, and what was the what happened that caused her to change her mind. So in this particular chapter, she's going on about NOW, the National Organization for Women, and she was a chapter president. She was the president of the Los Angeles chapter of the National Organization for Women. And this section is called Now They See It, Now They Don't. After NOW's intense campaign about the dangers of postpartum depression, I began to wonder how much work had NOW been doing on the issue prior to their support of Andrea Yates. From their battle cry that postpartum depression was America's ignored epidemic, I thought they must have had some project that had gone unnoticed. They must have been toiling for years without recognition in their efforts to save women from the madness that would consume them once they had children. Even knowing what I do about the hypocrisy of the left elite, I was surprised by the result of my search. If one can rely on the organization's own website, prior to the Yates murders, NOW had done nothing on the issue. NOW puts everything it possibly can on its website, posted our press releases, conference resolutions, actions, news commentary, and the organization's newspaper. Everything NOW has ever produced is supposed to be there. Although I was pretty sure that during my time with NOW, the organization never uttered a word about postpartum depression. I certainly never received any action notices, nor was it ever a conference issue. The website, started in 1995, would have been material on whatever they had been doing since my departure. Here's what I found on the now.org website regarding the subject they claimed was a life and death issue for women and their children. Of 4,762 posted documents, the keyword postpartum brought up only 9 documents, all written after the Yates murders and relating in one way or another to Andrea Yates. What's of interest here is less what we see than what we don't see. Not only is there nothing about the issue prior to the murders, there's nothing about it after Yates' sentencing either. It's as though postpartum depression magically popped up and then went away. The last out-of-touch whimper from NOW about the issue was released after the Yates verdict, when Kim Gandy announced, quote, "The National Organization for Women is troubled by the March 12 guilty verdict in the Andrea Yates trial and its implications for the 1 in 1,000 new mothers who will suffer from postpartum psychosis," unquote. The feminist elite are troubled by a verdict that tells society that if a woman kills her children, she will go to jail. NOW may not have succeeded in freeing Andrea Yates, but the fallout from their brainwashing has only just begun. And what of Houston NOW, the chapter that organized a support coalition for Yates? Following the verdict, their e-group posted a message from their president lovingly describing, quote, "a note from Andrea," unquote. The message reads in part, quote, "I received a note from Andrea. I have been sending her cards and she expressed her appreciation for them and for the support she's been given," unquote. Members are then given Yates's prison address so they too can enjoy being her pen pals. It won't surprise you to learn that another message from Houston's Now coordinator, posted at around the same time, reads, quote, "Pledge of Allegiance declared unconstitutional. It's about time," unquote. There's also a posting referring members to a Catholic-bashing internet site, giving emotional support to a mass murderer while cheering attacks on Christianity and on public mentions of God is not my kind of feminism, but it does make perfect sense for the malignant narcissists who infest the feminist establishment today. So the only comment that I wanted to make about this is that part of Marxist dogma has been the idea that parents and parenting and families are obsolete, that the state knows better how to raise a child than people do, than the parents do. And so this postpartum depression thing is another good way to say, see, parents can't be trusted with their children. This whole Andrea Yates thing is women as parents, they can't be trusted with their children. If parents were forced to give up their children to the state to be raised, nurtured, educated, etc., then there wouldn't be any issues surrounding postpartum depression, especially as it relates to the murder of children. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from David Horowitz's book, The Black Book of the American Left. Okay, thank you very much. And in his book, it's a kind of a history lesson. We dealt with the Vietnam War, and right now this is a post-Vietnam War remembrances about the left and the radical left of the 60s and how they were acting, what they were thinking. If they were capable of looking intently at the Soviet Union, leftists and liberals alike would have had to concur with Susan Sontag's contention, which many of them jeered at when she announced it, that communism is simply left-wing fascism. One of the reasons the left has been so cautious in its reassessments of the Soviets is the fiction that the USSR is on the side of history. This assumption is echoed in Fred Halliday's euphoric claim in a recent issue of New Left Review. The Soviet support was crucial to 14 Third World revolutions during the era of détente, including such triumphs of human progress as Iran and South Yemen, and in Andrew Kopkind's fatuous observation that, quote, "the Soviet Union has always sided with the revolutionists, the liberationists, the insurgents," unquote. In Ethiopia, propped up by 20,000 Cuban legionnaires, the Marxist government of Mengistu Haile Mariam has had as its main accomplishment a Red Campaign of Terror, its official designation, that killed thousands of people. Where were those who cheered the Soviets' work in behalf of the socialist zeitgeist when this episode took place? Or this past fall when the Marxist liberator squandered more than $40 million on a party celebrating the 10th anniversary of his murderous rule while his people starved? Where were they to point out the moral when capitalist America rushed in 250 million metric tons of grain to help allay the Ethiopian starvation, while the Soviets were managing to contribute only 10 million? Where are they now that Mengistu withholds emergency food supplies from the starving provinces of Eritrea and Tigray because the people there are in rebellion against his tyranny? Reagan is often upbraided for having described the Soviet Union as an evil empire. Those opposed to this term seem to be offended aesthetically rather than politically. Just how wide of the mark is the president? Oppressing an array of nationalities whose populations far outnumber its own, Russia is the last of the old European empires, keeping in subjugation not only formerly independent states, such as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Hitler's gift to Stalin, but also the nations of Eastern Europe. Every country liberated into the Soviet bloc has been transformed into a national prison where the borders are guarded to keep the inmates in rather than the foreigners out. The war in Afghanistan is much more a metaphor for the Soviets' view of the world than Vietnam ever was for America's. Of the approximately 16 million people living in Afghanistan at the time of the Soviet invasion, an estimated 1 million have already been killed and wounded. There are now about 4 million refugees. a figure that does not include internal refugees, the hundreds of thousands of villagers forced to leave their scorched earth for the Soviet-controlled big cities, the only places where food is available, or the thousands of Afghan children who have been taken to the Soviet Union to be educated and who will eventually be returned to their native land as spies and quislings. And again, he's given basically a little bit of a history lesson and showing the hypocrisy of the left. And so the left is about effect anyhow. They do not want to get involved in discussions, debates, or arguments. Dialectic, yes, because that's a power game. Playing the dialectic game is more of a power game. But as far as socialist dogma is concerned, we all want the same things. Everybody on earth wants socialist paradise. So there's nothing to debate in the first place. We just need to all get together and make it happen. Make the revolution happen, make socialist paradise happen, and the sooner the better. So with that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until Monday, I will be broadcasting on Christmas Eve, maybe on Christmas Day. We will see. But until then, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.